I think the forum is well placed. Regionalism is a hard thing to do. It's a hard thing to do anywhere. It's particularly hard when you're talking about countries which are so small in population and so spread out across what is a significant part of the globe. But this is an event which happens every year, gets all the leaders together. There are literally hundreds of people who work in the Pacific Island Forum system and are doing really good things in the environment, doing good things in education. And this is the forum which provides the premier policy-making arena for the great issues which are facing the Pacific. And this week we'll be talking about oceanscapes, we'll be talking about climate change, which are fundamental challenges for this region, making sure that the right decisions can be made around fishery management, about resource management in terms of oceans, and that the right advocacy can be put forward on the issue of climate change. We'll also be talking about gender initiatives in a part of the world where women's empowerment needs to occur more. But all of these are able to occur in the context of the forum, and I think that is because the forum is well placed.
Well, let's look at another issue that is arising in the Pacific and a sign of the growing strategic importance of this region. US Secretary of State Hillary Clinton is to attend the forum. A high-ranking Chinese delegation is due to attend. How much is that whole issue of China-US relations and how it impacts and ripples throughout the region, how much is that the number one Pacific challenge, balancing the at times competing interests and the power thrusts of those two superpowers throughout the region?
Well, I wouldn't describe the number one challenge of the Pacific as balancing the superpowers of China and the US. So I think their presence here is, as you rightly say, a reflection of the strategic importance of this region. But the challenges of climate change and managing the natural resources of this region are really the great challenges which face the Pacific. But I think the fact that we've got the Secretary of State likely coming to the forum at the end of this week is a real statement of the significance of the Pacific. It's also a real statement about America's increasing engagement in the Pacific, which is greatly welcomed. Last year we saw a delegation of 50 strong from the United States attend the Pacific Island Forum meeting in Auckland. We've seen the Assistant Secretary of State, Kirk Campbell, in each of the last 2 years do a significant trip throughout the Pacific, which has been very much welcomed by Pacific countries. And if Hillary Clinton comes at the end of this week, that will really be a culmination of a growing American interest, which is very welcome. At the Chinese end, China too is having a greater role in the Pacific, and that is also welcomed. I mean, Australia and all the countries of the Pacific, I think, recognise the difficulty associated with doing development work in this part of the world, and that China wants to come and lend a hand is greatly welcomed. And that they are present at the Pacific Island Forum at such a senior level, again, is a reflection of the importance of this part of the world. So I don't think it's really a question of balancing those two interests. I think both are welcome, but I think the fact that they are here is very much a recognition from both China and the US about the importance of this part of the world, and that's great to see.
Richard Marles, in regard to Fiji, there's been some re-strengthening of relations in recent times with the exchange of High Commissioners between Fiji and Australia once more. What further developments are likely to be put in place in the course of this forum?
This is an issue which is being overseen by the Pacific Island Forum's Ministerial Contact Group. It was the Ministerial Contact Group which visited Fiji earlier in the year and has been assessing the situation in Fiji. Now, as you rightly indicate, there has been progress in Fiji over the last few months during the course of this year. The constitutional process, which is underway in Fiji, which is being overseen by Professor Yashgai, a very eminent internationalist, is by virtue of him being there, and a process which everyone needs to take seriously, and we do. I think, having said that, it is too early to say now that Fiji has returned to democratic behaviour and the kind of human rights that you would expect with a democracy, and more progress, I think, is awaited on that front. And so, for that reason, it is too early to talk about readmitting Fiji into the forum. But that said, the Ministerial Contact Group, I think, has a role to play in continually assessing over the next few months and the course of the year progress in Fiji, and if significant progress has been made such that it warrants a decision from the forum later on, well then I think the ministerial contact group's in a position to recommend that.
But if the intent is to encourage Fiji further along the path of democracy, of democratic reforms, wouldn't it make sense to readmit Fiji sooner and very soon rather than later?
Well, the balance has to be gotten right in relation to this. It would send the wrong message to readmit Fiji in circumstances where there was not certainty about a return to democracy, and no one can say with certainty that that's where we are right now. There has been progress made, more progress is needed. The Ministerial Contact Group is the best body in place to assess whether or not in the future that progress has been made, and it really needs to be seized with the ability to assess that going forward.
Finally,
as we stand here this week, though, we're not in a position to be describing Fiji as having returned to democracy.
Richard Marles, finally, I know you've only been there for a little more than a day, but what sort of reaction have you heard in your time there to Australia reopening asylum seeker processing centres on Manus Island in PNG and Nauru?
Well, there is a curiosity about that from the other nations in the Pacific, but it's not an issue which is going to dominate the discussions of the Pacific. It really isn't the issue which represents one of the great challenges facing the Pacific. Of course, in relation to both PNG and Nauru on a bilateral front, we will continue discussions with them and take the opportunity of both our Prime Minister and their leaders being here in the Cook Islands this week to see that issue progressed. But on a broader scale, I think whilst there is curiosity, and we're certainly happy to provide information about what's going on, it's by no means the major issue which is dominating this week.